Welcome to the show. It's New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center, located in Madera, California. And boy, I've got a guest today that I've been really excited about getting this together, and we finally managed to get the time where we could both meet here this morning, and so it's going to happen today. Harvey Bishop is his name. He is a blogger extraordinaire, as I said when I wrote this up, but he's also a contributor to Science of Mind magazine. He is a professor of political science, University of Colorado in Denver. He's an all-around really special sort of fella. He is a spiritual sojourner, and I have enjoyed my interaction with him over this past year greatly. And so it is my pleasure to welcome Harvey Bishop to the show. Harv, welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much, Reverend Steve. It's a great honor to be with you today.
Oh, this is, the honor's all mine for sure. And I want to start out with a little bit of history about Harvey Bishop. Harvey, how did you come to New Thought, and as it went from there, just kind of let it unfold, so to speak?
Okay, it was my good karma to grow up in a family that was very spiritually open. My grandmother, my parents, they all explored widely and drew from a wide variety of sources, and one of those was New Thought. My grandmother read Holmes' epic poem, The Voice Celestial, that honored the truth in all religions. My mom read books by Joel Goldsmith, virtually all of them, and also Ralph Waldo Trine's classic, In Tune with the Infinite, Maxwell Maltz, some of the early positive thinking stuff. So I was steeped both in being open to multiple spiritual traditions and New Thought. And as fate would have it, our home was approximately a mile from what would become the largest New Thought church in the world, Mile High Church of Religious Science. And so when I was 18, it seemed natural to go out and explore that. And I found the message that really hit home. I mean, I was very comfortable because they honored the truth in all religions. And at the time, I didn't have a lot of self-confidence. I'd had some rough teen years, and to hear that message that God was within me and that I had the power to shape my life in positive ways, it was hugely transformative.
And that is the ultimate message in New Thought, whether you want to, call it religious science or unity or any, divine science or any of them, that infiniteness of the divine, God being everywhere. And as you said, as a young person, how it filled something within you that was really needed. That is the power of our message today. As far as for me, when I speak to people, our young people today, gosh, we got so much going on in the world, and you just go, wow, and here's something that it's a message that they can take and they can use to embody to help create their own reality. So, okay, Harvey, you found religious science in Mile High. What an incredible place to be. You became a professor of political science, one of my past loves for sure. But you started writing your blog. In your blog, you call it Exploring Social Justice, Sustainability, and Spirituality. How did that come about, Harv?
Well, I've had a strong interest, a strong conviction in terms of social justice since I was fairly young. I came of age in the 1960s. I was 14 in 1968. Martin Luther King passed away, well, he was assassinated, and the same with Bobby Kennedy. A few months later, watching the coverage of the Democratic Convention in Chicago with police beating nonviolent demonstrators in the streets. And even though I was only 14 and in junior high, it just really hit me over the head. Something is wrong here, things need to be done differently. and add to that the music of the time, the folk music, Joan Baez, Pete Seeger with their positive, uplifting message, the Beatles, of course, All You Need Is Love, the moves for love and peace, and it made an indelible print on me that lasted a lifetime. The other is my dad passed away from an environmentally caused pneumonia in 1990, and at that time I thought, well, you know, I shop at, you know, Whole Foods. I recycle. I felt like I was very virtuous and environmental. But after my dad passed away from the environmentally caused illness, I really felt a call to push that deeper. And so I went back to school, did an additional graduate degree in political science with an emphasis on trying to understand, you know, where we went wrong with the environment. And all of that ties together, I think, with the New Thought message of oneness. Walt Whitman wrote in his famous poem that what degrades another degrades me, because we are all one. And whether that's through prejudice or environmental degradation, what have you. So I think there's a strong, strong intersection between our spiritual message and solving our world's problems.
You know, in a New Thought, and we had a phone conversation a couple days ago, and this is one of the things that we talked about. New Thought has always been, in its various forms, on the cutting edge of social issues. You know, women's rights movements at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, civil rights movements, in the most recent time, the LGBT movement to, you know, equality in marriage and so on and so forth. It's just, we've always been there. And so, you know, you've created this blog, and it really does tie into what's going on. There's things going on in the New Thought family, if you will, across the country regarding, people coming to and leaving New Thought. And that's how really I got introduced to you, was through that particular conversation. And these ideas of social justice is now a conversation within the New Thought community. And so how long have you've been doing this blog? How long have you been doing the blog, Harvey?
Gosh, it just started last summer, Reverend Steve, and I've been shocked to the extent that it's taken off. Its genesis was really pretty simple. I was ranting, I guess, one night when I was hiking with my wife near our home, and she says, you know, you really should do a blog. And something hit me, and I thought, well, maybe so. I don't think anyone would read it, but it would be a good creative challenge. And so for some reason, I usually sit on things for a while, but I had it up and running in 3 days. And I would have been thrilled, quite frankly, to have maybe a few hundred people look at it, but it's taken off. People have responded. There's thousands of readers each month. People have come forward, such as yourself, to contribute really thoughtful guest posts, and the comment section, the dialogue going on. I love it. You know,
and I want to thank you not only for allowing me to guest host, but you provide a venue for a lot of different people within the New Thought community and some outside the New Thought community to bring their commentary to the fore, if you will, and it keeps, and for me this is something very important. It keeps a conversation going, which is a conversation in many different areas that we need to have. Oftentimes it gets buried in emotionalism and stuff, but you know, the format that you have created in your blog, I think it's very powerful, and I'm not surprised that you've got the readership that you have, because you know, it's just really neat. I really appreciate it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say thank you for that. And the whole notion of conversation, which you and I have talked about before, is so important, because to evolve, we need to ask questions. And when we ask questions, you know, our ideas can change and they can shift, and we get a bigger picture. And I think that was certainly emphasized in Dr. Holmes' life search. He evolved throughout his lifetime. And in one of his last talks at a Asilomar before he passed away, he talked about how New Thought and Science Mind would eventually evolve. It would change. And so I really want the blog to be part of that conversation, part of that dialogue. The other thing, too, is a lot of times I would do interviews with people for Science Mind magazine, and we would get into these really deep topics, but, magazine space is limited. And so the blog was also an opportunity to kind of bring some of those deeper conversations to the fore.
We, I just got the signal. We're going to be going to a break here shortly, but I want to kind of finish this up because we got a lot of territory to cover. But I didn't realize until I think we'd been communicating for a while the role that you actually play as a contributor to the magazine. I get the magazine at the center and I get it home and I read it sometimes, and one day I realized the picture. It's this guy Harvey Bishop, and this is the guy that's doing the blog, But you got some really good stuff that you've put out there. In your spiritual evolutionary journey in New Thought, have you participated in classes and study, or is it just been Harv's personal journey itself?
Both. I've took all the courses up to and short of practitioner training, and some additional coursework beyond that. But I've taken the full suite of courses. Dr. Roger Teal, many fine teachers.
Yeah, what a blessing to be there. I mean, if I could go anywhere for training, that'd probably be where I'd want to go. So anyway, we're going to wrap up this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about Dr. Holmes and religious science and its place in the world today. So we'll see you when we come back.
Fresno State students, listen up. Looking for a place to live? Try University Place. Call 559-229-2295 or visit FresnoUniversityPlace.com for more information. Need a dentist? Call Dr. David Wright at 559-222-6213 or visit bitemedental.com. Get solar power for your home. Email Dan Siemens at legacypower.com or call 559-312-5011. Rethink your drink with independent Javita member Christine Levin. Call 559-301-5177 and get healthy and wealthy.
For information on author Steve Hammond's Rise of the Penguin saga, visit www.riseofthepenguins.net.
Kissed by the Moon, your cloth diaper and natural parenting store. Call 559-231-7101 or visit them online at kissedbythemoon.com.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back. It's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, and my guest on the show today is Harvey Bishop, a blogger extraordinaire. He is a contributor to Science Mind magazine. He lives in Colorado, and we've been talking about so much of what's been going on, or what led him to where he's at today. Harvey, we're going to talk about Ernest Holmes now. We mentioned him a little bit in the last segment. Of course, with religious science, that you can't really separate the two. But Holmes, he wrote in 1938 what we often refer to as the textbook and many other books. And it's been the basis for religious science as we've, moved through our evolutionary process. But you were talking about it, and as Holmes mentioned in one of his last talks at the Silmar, the idea and the concept of religious science evolving. Tell me a little bit about your concept and your take on this.
Well, I think Dr. Jim Lockard has a really good way of putting this. He says, for many years, it's like religious science and New Thought in general was sort of focused, sitting in a circle, kind of focusing on the individual and individual healing. And absolutely 100% there's room for that. I don't think that's going away. But Dr. Jim says that it's now time for us to look out to the world at large and see what New Thought has to offer, what we bring to the table in terms of our philosophy of oneness, and how we can start to address issues of social injustice. Holmes himself, as I wrote about a couple of weeks ago, he did have some instances in some early editions of the textbook where he showed some of the racial prejudice of the times. Yet at other times in his life, in terms of his practice in accepting people, he was well ahead of his times, as the historian and author Mitch Horowitz has written about. Holmes did a New Thought rally at the beginning of World War II with another teacher named Frank B. Robinson, and that was an integrated event. Blacks and whites sitting together in a time of severe racial segregation. Another point in time, the editors of Science of Mind magazine relegated an African-American religious science church to the bottom of a directory. It took it out of alphabetical order. And Holmes reprimanded them. No, that's not the way to be.
He was very incensed over that issue, that particular issue.
And he went to the church and apologized. So I mean, he's a guy that both showed in the early days some degree of prejudice in the way that he wrote about primitive African peoples, but at the same time, over time, the practice showed a lack of prejudice, and he continued to evolve on these issues throughout his life. So I would say that the big issue here is a lot of people seem to want to freeze Science of Mind with the textbook, and Holmes has a whole lifetime of writings, and I think we would be well served to see how he evolved as a guideline for how we too can evolve.
He did, but I don't. And now this is where I have a little bit of a different viewpoint on Dr. Holmes. When I don't know that he so much in his early writings, and some of the things you referenced in your article, necessarily was displaying prejudice, as he was speaking in the phraseology, the context of the time. But I don't think Holmes was ever, at least as I've been able to read and understand his stuff, I think he was always a very progressive individual. And we can look back with our consciousness today and say, well, obviously those were not very to use the phrase politically correct ways of putting things, but that was the time, that was the context, but I think you're right in the sense that Holmes always did evolve or continued to evolve. You look at his early stuff. You look at the earlier edition of the Science of Mind book, and then the later edition that is used widely throughout Science of Mind, the 1938 edition, is the 1938 edition, and it wasn't. Holmes never updated that edition, and yet he continued to study and he continued to grow, and so. In his own spiritual life, there is an evolution, and I think in one of your blogs last year, or whatever, you mentioned the incident where at the end of his life, he was approached by one of the ministers of the L.A. church, and who was chastising Holmes for teaching a class on Aurobindo, and because it wasn't religious science. And Holmes' answer is, I am religious science,
Yes.
and that's the deal. And I think, it's a big tent. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this. I tend to be what I would say more, at least Reverend Elizabeth Marshall has told me I'm more of an orthodox religious scientist. But that's, I guess, because I don't attach so much of the churchianity, if you will, to the concept of religious science. I believe that in and of itself, it's a spiritual process, but we can go anywhere spiritually once we have, embodied that process. So, that's kind of where I come from on this particular issue. But, I know that Reverend Jim and Reverend Gary Simmons from Unity, they've been pushing the outside the box, if you will, in the directions for New Thought as a whole. And you've brought a lot of that to the table. And go ahead.
Well, yeah, and I also want to jump back to, in terms of, I mean, I do 100% agree with you that I'm not saying that Holmes was demonstrating individual prejudice, but I mean he was reflecting the prejudice of the time. The other piece is that some readers felt that I was attacking Holmes and by quoting Reverend Vione on that issue, and no, absolutely not. No one would probably want to be held to things we may have said 20, 30 years ago as reflecting who we really are.
Absolutely.
The larger point into that particular blog was just showing that I think that Holmes absolutely evolved. We can evolve, and I think we make a mistake when we treat the textbook as holy writ and are afraid to move beyond that. And that's the main thrust that was there.
Isn't that the problem with most any spiritual philosophy, when you attach that kind of concept to the literature that is associated with it? It seems to always end up with some problem with literalism and so on and so forth. But
very true.
I didn't feel that you were attacking Holmes in that particular blog. I appreciated the fact that what you brought to the table was the idea of expansion. When I think about consciousness, a lot of people think about consciousness in a level of higher to lower, lower to higher. Personally, my take is it's just an expanded consciousness. We were born with the divine, within us. We have our blinders on, and as we go and we grow spiritually, our consciousness expands. I don't know that it really raises or lowers, but
right.
And so it's a journey for all of us, including Holmes. And one of the things that I do appreciate with your blog is this idea of evolution. Now, it may not be right for me, but that's perfect. What works for me is not something that we have to sell for the world. And likewise, what you bring, you reach people, and the conversations that you bring, you reach people that otherwise would sit maybe silently or, not feel included in the conversation, if you will.
And I think it's a long time saying in religious science to treat and move your feet. Treat being affirmative prayer, and moving your feet, taking action. Dr. Fred Vogt, who was a minister at Mile High Church before he passed away, used to say, you can't treat for prosperity and then just sit on your couch and expect that a helicopter is going to come and land a satchel full of money on your porch.
Oh, darn.
And I think the same point that he made is also true for this notion of creating a world that works for everyone, of focusing on social justice from this ethic of oneness. And we need to take some action. I don't think some of my conservative readers have been highly concerned that people would be sort of forced into a progressive Democrat point of view, or that they would be forced to be politically correct, or that there would be one right way, or to participate in a center or a church you'd have to engage in something. I haven't really seen any evidence that that's the case. I think each center is kind of formulating their own path on this. The CSL has started World Day of Service to follow up on the World Day of Prayer. Is just an opportunity for people in centers to go out and give a day volunteering in their community. That's part of creating a world that works for everyone. So I don't necessarily see it as It's, it's as if some people seem to fear that they're going to be drugged and wake up at a Bernie Sanders rally, or find themselves marching in a gay pride parade. And I just don't think that's the case. And if people are there to heal and work on their own individual consciousness, I don't think that changes.
No,
so
absolutely.
I personally, I don't see the risk that some of my more conservative readers do.
No, Harvey, and I think we spoke about this a little bit on the phone. See, in New Thought in general, religious science in particular, what we teach, when you align yourself with principle, when you begin to, in consciousness, bring yourself into that understanding, you can't, to me, it just seems impossible. You cannot have a separation from what I would call a social consciousness. You can't look at something and see where there's discord or lack or problems in the world and just turn your back on it, as an individual, whether that be participating actively, whether it be participating through spiritual practices. And so in our greater scheme of New Thought, having, and I think this is why we've been on the cutting edge socially in the various issues over the years, is you just can't, you can't, I don't believe, separate yourself out from that. I mean, if you embody the concept of unity, if you embody the concept of oneness, what part of yourself in that unity and that oneness are you going to turn your back on? You can't do it. How you do it is the conversation I think that we're having today. And that's, like I said before, it's a conversation we need to have.
It's beautifully expressed, Reverend Stephen. I think you may have the beginnings of another blog post there.
Oh, the writing has been, it's a relatively new venture for me. It's always been, it's one of those things that, how we self-impose limitations, done it for years, but I'm working on breaking out of that. And I appreciate you helping me with it, Harv. It's been good. I've learned a lot from you in the process. But what is it, making a world that works for everyone is the theme that the CSL organization has embodied for this year. And that is kind of directed at those social justice or social consciousness issues. I have a good friend, Minister Reverend Tim Peterson, up in Edmonton, and he and I have been having some of these conversations about this as it's embodied in his center up in Edmonton, and the things, how it's affected him. And, it affected him in a way that is made changes in how he presents at his center, and that's where your conversation is taking it. That's the importance of having it.
Yeah, I definitely think that's the next step. And again, I don't think it's a matter of people being pigeonholed or forced to do anything. It's laying it out as a general concept, and I really feel strongly that there are conservative ways to approach these issues and there are liberal ways. And unfortunately, just the issue of care and concern for the poor or concern for the environment in itself has become stigmatized as political, and people immediately line up into the pro and con camps. And it's highly unfortunate because, there are creative conservative approaches, there are creative liberal approaches, and there are creative approaches that combine both conservative and liberal. So as you said earlier, it's a big tent, and I don't see that people are going to be programmed to turn into progressive Democrats.
Well, I don't know that that's really an issue of sort, at least for me anyway, but we're going to talk more about this, social issues and social justice. We're going to cut away for our next commercial break. Got some more good stuff coming. I've really been enjoying the conversation, Harv, so we'll see you when we come back.
Pasture-grazed, delicious, nutrient-dense, 100% organic raw milk from Organic Pastures. Visit organicpastures.com or call 1-877-RAW-MILK.
I was an addict, an opiate addict. getting 3 years clean in October.
I was renewed at the Fresno Rescue Mission. My mom, who does a lot of cooking, has been part of the rescue mission, has been willing to help teach people to make jams and jellies and other food.
Sa the Fresno Rescue Mission, do tôi có học lử trong thia do ilu yang nhà trong do để có bá tàu bé bá tàu có thia ở trong đó.
And I believe that downtown Fresno needs a renewal as well.
Tree of Life Cafe represents new, healthy growth in downtown Fresno. I've seen men and women go through rehab programs. They want to start a new life. And yet when they get out on the street, they find it very difficult to get a job. Nobody will give them a chance. That's what this cafe is designed to do.
You will be like family to us. We will serve you our home-cooked food made with farm-fresh produce that comes from farmers right here in our valley.
We love downtown Fresno.
Sunshine Natural Health in Tulare, California is your source for nature's best remedies. Call Sunshine Natural Health at 559-688-2063 and get healthy. If you're considering a reverse mortgage in the Central Valley or just want more information, contact Jerry Carmichael. She's experienced and, more important, she's local. Call 559-903-6903. Call Brian Kosick today at 559-977-1976. Protecting you and those you love financially. Make an appointment today.
At Miracle Realty, we've been providing premier professional residential sales and property management in residential and commercial property for years. We manage single-family homes, condominiums, apartment buildings, commercial buildings, office space, and much more. No matter what experience level you have in property management, Miracle Realty strives to make your experience as stress-free as possible. Serving Madera and the surrounding areas, we use the latest technology and provide top-notch service. We're a trusted and reliable name in residential sales and property management with the experience to answer any questions or complications that might come up. Give us a call today or visit us online for more information.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back. It's New Thought Talk. I am your host, the Reverend Steve Walling, from the Spiritual Awareness Center located in the Central Valley of California. And my guest for this show today is Harvey Bishop. He is a contributor to Science of Mind magazine. He is a blogger extraordinaire, a professor of political science, and an all-around great guy. Anyway, Harvey, when we went to the break, we were just beginning to really kind of get into the idea of social justice, social consciousness. And why don't you do us the honor of defining social justice as we see it in the world today?
Okay, in a sense, it's a little like pinning Jell-O to the wall. It means a lot of things to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But in essence, for many years, with the founding of representative democracy, people felt that the right to vote, free speech, those core things that we value as Americans, were essentially all the freedoms that were needed. But around 1900, beginning of the progressive era, people began to say, if you're born in poverty, are you really free? Does the right to vote matter that much if you're hungry? So social justice is really about looking at basic necessities, food, shelter, housing. Do people have equal access to the goods that society has to offer? Are they stopped because of their race, their gender, their sexual orientation? And later on, the environment enters into the picture as well. Studies have shown that the majority of environmental hazards tend to be shunted off to poor communities of color. So environmental justice is part of this picture as well. So we're looking at equality. We're looking at helping to meet people's basic needs so that they then can go out and take advantage of their freedoms. They can take advantage of voting and different things like that.
Okay, and social consciousness, my take on that would be more of the individual relationship to the issues that you were talking about. You know, do I have a caring feeling or an enlightened understanding, if you will, of environmental issues, of racial issues, of issues of freedom, not only
locally, but globally too, and then how that moves me as an individual. And when I talk, when we've spoken before about social consciousness, that's where I guess coming at more of a straight religious science approach, if you will. I believe that's where our power is, not that we don't need to be active, because I do believe we do, and that's where I think we transcend from moving in a social consciousness, personal way into a social justice way into the world, if you will, into action. But in religious science, that's where the power of our foundation lies in that, as I said earlier. And something we talked about the other day, that old story where you teach him, or you feed a man a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him to fish, you feed him for the rest of his life. That's a nice story, but if your individual is starving, they're not going to pay attention to the things you're trying to teach them so that they can take care of themselves. There has to be a balance, if you will. You've got to recognize that you can't just say, okay, that's a poor area over there, and if we just tell them to change their thinking, they will change their life. You've got to go beyond that, and that's kind of where we're at today, I think, and the world is waking up to that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Reverend Steve, and I think both social consciousness and social justice walk hand in hand. I interviewed Obadiah Harris. Obadiah Harris was an evangelical minister, open-minded evangelical minister who came to study with Dr. Holmes, and Dr. Holmes had heard that there was this great preacher. He went to see Obadiah Harris, invited him to study with him and come into the organization, and Obadiah Harris wrote a really remarkable book in the last year called The Simple Road, and one of the things that he says in that book is that laws and politics and different things like that, they may be imperfect, but until consciousness is raised, they're necessary. So who knows what things might look like, once we have a mass consciousness raising. But prior to that time, things like Supreme Court decisions matter. Certainly the recent decisions on same-sex marriage, in my view, increased equality in society. So we can't rely just on consciousness, but at the same time, consciousness is incredibly important, because without that expanded consciousness, people don't have the vision. They don't know what to work towards.
Yeah, and consciousness, it's the catalyst behind the action that ultimately takes place. At least, that's kind of my perspective on it.
I would say that, it's yes, and it also, the two kind of feed off each other. I've read articles that said that a majority of people did not support desegregation in the U.S. until after the Brown v. Board decision. Once the Supreme Court ruled in that case, public opinion started to shift. So in some cases, consciousness and public opinion leads. In some cases, a certain court action or something may kind of work back the other way a little bit too, and help to expand people's consciousness.
I can't disagree with you, but I am a little bit insofar as that Supreme Court decision would have never happened if somebody didn't have the consciousness behind it, and that is where the seed, for me, that's where the seeds get planted, and that's what, the power of new thought. We plant seeds. You look at society today and how many new thought principles are in practice generally in society that were inconceivable back at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. And you mentioned Mitch Horowitz earlier. He's a great proponent of recognizing, those things that are in society today that came out of new thought. And, it's true that we need the Supreme Court decisions. We need the movement of people that have the ability to make movement take place. But the only reason why those movements take place, the only reason why we have those decisions, is somebody
had the consciousness. The divine principle touched somebody. They came into contact with something. Maybe they woke up one morning with inspiration. I don't know. But we have within New Thought this great spiritual practice philosophy that we can continue to plant these seeds. Whether someone takes it for a Sunday churchianity, like I've said earlier, I don't really care. But to put it into practice, and your blog and the things that you're doing, really kind of that you plant those seeds within our own community.
Well, I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is, clearly there are people that are on the leading edge in terms of consciousness, in terms of ideas. But I think that the thing is then that can shape, and then it gets reflected back, and the thought leaders, may definitely be inspired. But then there's that other layer of how mass consciousness tends to grow, and so I wouldn't at all disagree with you in saying that consciousness, and I'm not saying consciousness didn't play a role in those court decisions or things like that, but that in turn those enlightened decisions that we will see in retrospect also influence consciousness on a larger scale.
You bet. And it's like I say, it's seeds that get planted, and maybe it's that one person that shouts out into a vast emptiness to begin with, but somebody hears it. Whether they hear it through their ear, whether they hear it in consciousness, whether they hear it through divine inspiration, and we move forward. And you look at for me, I look at the history of humanity, how we have, things. You can look in the world today, Harv, and see just totally terrible things going on in the world that have been there since the beginning of humanity. But in general, there's been an up-leveling of consciousness throughout the history, and it's through things like that, through individuals, through spiritual practices, where we've seen these changes. And we see it grows, it evolves, and people like Ernest Holmes and Trine and Emmett Fox, and one of my favorites is a fellow by the name of Christian Larson, who was around in the early days also. But those are things, and today you've got people like yourself, and you've got Dr. Ken Gordon, who is leading the CSL organization. You've got things going on in UFBL that are moving forward in unity and stuff, and these are exciting times for us, I think.
They really are. And to be part of that conversation is a huge thrill. I think there's a couple of areas that we could look at too that I think where new thought ideas, or at least the way they're interpreted, kind of get in the way of what we could call social justice. And one of them we talked about the other day, which is the idea of individual responsibility. That the early New Thought writers were very focused on individual responsibility, the idea that you create your own reality, that changing your life in and of it, or your thoughts will change your life in and of itself. And I think now we're more aware of the role of social systems. As Dr. Roger Thiel says, we sort of have an immature economic system. It's based on competition and scarcity versus a view of abundance. It's based on a lot of use of non-replaceable natural resources. And so we have to, I think, very much look at our collective social consciousness, and we have to look at the way we have kind of set up our social systems. You told a great story when I talked to you on the phone about the minister who said he would treat for people with financial problems, but he took great pride in the fact that he had never actually reached into his pocket to give somebody a little boost in the beginning, and that goes back to the teaching people to fish analogy. But if you don't if we don't realize that people can, for better or worse, they can fall into hard times. without it really being their fault, without indeed even thinking their way into it.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're in a group that's subject to racial prejudice, I mean, that can make things a lot harder.
Yeah, it really can, and we get caught up. We talk about this thing called racial consciousness, and that's a story for a whole nother day that we could spend a whole show on. But there are many influences, and teaching individuals to expand their consciousness beyond where they're at to allow for newer, more powerful ideas to take hold is, again, this is where I get real excited with what it is we teach. When you understand the basic of the principles behind it, it is more than just change your thinking, change your life. It's, why does that take place? What is it? There's as Holmes said, there's a power and a presence for good in the universe that is available to each of us. But what does it take for us to realize our availability to it? And that's what it's all about for me. We got to take our last break, and we'll be coming back. We'll kind of finish this up, and we're going to close off on another little topic that you and I discussed, this idea of tribalism, because it plays so much into so many other things. So we're going to take our break, and we'll see you when we come back.
Rethink your drink with independent Javita member Christine Levin. Call 559-301-5177 and get healthy and wealthy. Email Michelle Bradford at londonproperties.com or call 559-907-9738 to get your dream home today.
Need raisins? Call National Raisin Company at 559-834-5981 or online at nationalraisin.com.
I think people think of raw food or healthy food as not having much flavor, and this is so flavorful.
So very nutrient dense, and it feeds my body. I love raw Fresno because I've learned so much about nutrition. It's organic, and it's delicious. It's nutrient dense and very tasty.
Food that's alive, probiotics, it's healthy vegetables to get that protein, and it's a game changer. It's awesome.
Come to Raw Fresno just because I love the food, and there's not too many options or any options like this anywhere.
I come back because the food is delicious. It's definitely a new experience, the different tastes, the salad, it's absolutely delicious.
I love the food because, as I found, this food actually has a lot of flavor. It's all so good, it's hard for me to decide what to eat, so then I'll just take samples of everything.
My husband and I both are addicted to it, and it's like we go through kale withdrawals because it makes us feel better.
It's so healthy, and because it tastes so good. I love the wraps, I love the chocolate cheesecake, and I know everything in it is good for me, and I can eat it and feel good about myself.
The food is so healthy and very tasty.
I would definitely come back to Raw Fresno.
I'm not even the same person, and it's all to this food. It's just amazing. It's transforming.
CentralValleyTalk.com.
Welcome back. It's New Thought Talk. I'm your host, Steve Walling. Reverend Steve Walling from the Spiritual Awareness Center. My guest for this show has been Harvey Bishop. We are in our last segment. Time flies. It goes by way too fast. So, Harvey, we were talking about social justice and social consciousness. But when we spoke on the phone the other day, I mentioned this idea of tribalism, and we see this played out from a local, almost a family level, to the international scene, if you will. And this is one of those areas where I think New Thought has a very significant role that it can play in overcoming those concepts. Because, again, when you embody the idea of a oneness, a unity, of no duality, tribalism has to go away. When you get to an idea of acceptance, tribalism has to go away. We've got to open ourselves up to the true reality of our allness, togetherness, if you will.
Well, the Parliament of World Religions, which my wife Diane, who edits Science Mind magazine, and I attended last fall, was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it was deeply moving to see the Buddhists, the Sikhs, the Hindus, the Christians, New Thought people all come together in a sense of community. And as I wrote in the blog, when I watched people doing the dances of universal peace, these concentric circle dances together, and you'd see a Catholic priest in a clerical collar, and the Sikh in their white garb, and the Buddhists, and it just moved me to tears. And yeah, we do. I think we see too much. You could call it tribalism or parochialism or fundamentalism, and I think the core thing here is people realizing there's not just one way, and that one way is not necessarily their way. That there's many paths to the divine, and you're absolutely right. That's an area where New Thought excels. One of the first things I heard at Mile High at the beginning of the service: we honor all people, all faith traditions. And that's a momentous leap in consciousness for people to get to.
Yeah, it is, and I'm glad you mentioned the Parliament, because I did want to touch on that a bit. I read some of your I think you had an article in the Science of Mind magazine, and share a little bit more of that experience, because that really is kind of the crux of where I believe that ultimately humanity needs to move towards.
And well, I was struck especially by the fact that it's every tradition has its fundamentalists, and it has its more expansive worldview folks, and so I think it's really less a matter of the faith tradition. There's a lot of Islamophobia in today's world. But there were representatives of Islam there who were amazing, and likewise, problems with Christian fundamentalism or any type of fundamentalism, and trying to plant a flag and say that you and you alone have the right view of God. Once people get past that, I don't think it matters particularly what your faith tradition is. The other thing that I think is really cool too is at the Parliament, people, they really lived out their faith. They were true to it. They didn't try to smush over artificially differences that might be there, but they were open to honest, respectful dialogue, and again realizing that everyone had a piece of the truth. So, if as a world we could move into that space, I think it'd be very remarkable, where we're both honoring the tradition and honoring others' traditions.
Absolutely, Harvey. And of course, my view of God is the only real, true, correct. How many times have we heard that? But opening up, and it comes down to one word: acceptance. For me anyway, and I believe that when we can move into a world of acceptance within ourselves and on a global consciousness, if you will, all of a sudden so many things go away. That doesn't mean you become a doormat for someone else, but it means you accept the reality of them being a divine creation that is individualized. It has their own individuality, and then you can fill in the pieces behind that, the details. And
it's a huge leap. And to be perfectly honest, it's one of the great unanswered questions in political theory. How do you take a country like the U.S. that's extremely pluralistic with so many different points of view, and how do we ultimately, have tolerance and respect for each other? And there's no clear answer. People have worked on it. But there really is no clear answer, and I don't want to say that there could be an easy kumbaya moment. I think it's very possible we'll continue to grow and expand, and I certainly pray that that's so. But we can't paper over the difficulty here.
No, we can't, and it is it's evolution. And evolution is not often pretty and not often comfortable, but it is a force to be reckoned with. And Harvey, I'm getting the signal we've got to wrap this up for today. I want to thank you again for being on the show. This was, if you've got time in the future, I'd like to come back and, touch on things that we didn't touch on, or maybe we, can go into greater depth. But once again, Harvey, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Reverend Steve. Yeah, I'd love to come back and visit with you more.
We'll be doing that for sure then. Okay, boy, I am so happy to have had Harvey on the show. It's been very informative, and there's just so many more things that I can think of that we can take this conversation deeper and into more expansive areas. I want to again recommend, if you are on Facebook, look up Harvey Bishop, his blog, his Facebook page. He is a contributor to Science of Mind magazine, and he's an all-around really great guy. So, again, I want to recommend that. And we got to close today. I enjoy doing this so much, and we get to the end so quickly. But I want to thank you for being with us. If you're seeing us live, or if you happen to see us on a YouTube video later on, I want to thank you for watching the show. You can go to help support this show, you can go to the Madera webpage for the center, and that's maderasac.com or spiritualawarenesscenter.info, and you can contribute there. There's a link through PayPal that helps support the show and helps support the ministry. I want to thank all of you that have supported us in the past, and all of you that are going to support us in the future. And, time is running out. So, my friends, as you go through this week, as you go through your life day by day, know that the light of God surrounds you. It completely surrounds you, and the love of God enfolds you. God is that love essence. The power of God protects you, and the presence of God watches over you. Truly, wherever you are, God is there, and all is well. Blessings, my friends. Have a great week. I'll see you when we come back. Thanks.
Fresno State students, listen up.